So we're back for the third time to talk about Mr. Shani Saturn in astrology, this time going through the sector of the houses, which is about the others. So we're going to be covering Saturn in the 6th, 7th, and 8th house today. Hi, Jay.
Hello.
It's like
Sixth house is a good house.
sixth house is a good house, yeah.
For Saturn. So I'm excited for the sixth house.
Yeah, sixth house, I'm excited that because the last two, the 4 and 5, were
Yeah, that
just
was
like,
intense.
oh, too intense to have Saturn there. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Saturn will generally do better in this sector of the chart because Saturn is, up to now, I've talked about planets in terms of their personal relational dynamic. Like Venus and Mercury are very relational and trying to connect with other people. I said that Mars is relational dynamic, that it needs competitors and oppositions. That's how it thrives. We've skipped Jupiter. We'll come to Jupiter, but Saturn's relational dynamic is impersonal. So Saturn likes other people in a general kind of way. So that's why Saturn's related to like the working class and the underclass and the underdog. And so it's Saturn does have a relational dynamic that's related to others in an impersonal way. And now when we come to the sector of the chart that has to do with others, in a general way, Saturn feels more comfortable here, especially in the sixth house, because the sixth house has to do about how do we support others? How do we become of service to others? And this is exactly what Saturn's about. And when we talked about the sectors of the chart, we said that there are the anchor points, which are the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th house. And the houses in between, one of them comes to support that anchor point, and the other one erodes the significations of that anchor point. So our primary anchor point in this sector of the chart about the others is the 7th house. And the 6th house is below the 7th house anchor point. So it comes to support the significations of the 7th house. Whereas we'll see later, the 8th house is above the 7th house and it starts to erode the significations of the 7th house. But should I start with the significations of Saturn quickly and then go through the signification of the 6th house and then jump into how Saturn does here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've explained Saturn's key signification in the other two videos too, but just in case you're just watching this video, Saturn's primary key signification is negativity, like the minus sign, which represents deducing and deducting. And then Saturn significations can be categorized into 5 different sets. In the first set, we could say Saturn is about bad luck, failure, scarcity, poverty, stinginess, detachment, rejection, abnormalities, perversions. And then in the second category, Saturn has a slant that's pessimistic. It's also about realism, distrust, criticism, analysis. Saturn's very objective and scientific. It's rational, and it's about practicality and just practical viewpoint and ways of doing things. In the next category, Saturn's about restriction and limitations. It's about having disabilities or the inability to do something. It's about subordination and servitude, service. It's about ordinary people, the working class, blue collar. And then in the next category, Saturn has to do with time, endurance, being stubborn. And in this sense, it also signifies longevity. And in the last category, Saturn has to do with decay, aging, illness, destruction, and ultimately death. So these are the fun significations of Saturn. And then when we go to the 6th house, we'll see that the 6th house is supporting others in terms of how do we bring ourselves to be of service to other people. So it's kind of negating us and our personal needs, and now we have to kind of become subordinated to someone else. And in this way, the 6th house has to do with work, our employment, how we are employees.
So your day-to-day routine?
It's your day-to-day routine, but the grimy, like the chores, like taking out the garbage every day is very routine, practical. You just gotta do it, you know?
Yeah.
And then it also has to do with debts. It has to do with enemies, thieves, dangerous animals that are small though, like even our pets who are in a state of service to our pets. It also represents a lot of the worries that we have, because even like when you take the practical daily routines, we do actually even get worried about those things, like, oh my god, I didn't do the laundry, I don't have clean clothes for work tomorrow. And if I don't wear clean clothes to work and I smell like BO, then my boss is going to say something. Like literally, it just keeps coming back into this house. And then this house also has another set of signification, which is it's a house that promotes disintegration of health. So it's supporting illness. So when you put Saturn here, the instinct is to say someone's doomed here because Saturn's just going to augment all this stuff. I'm going to be like subservient to someone else. I'm going to be in debt. But that's not how it works. This is a Doshanta house. This is a very difficult negative house. That's how it's perceived. Saturn is a planet of negativity. Saturn is a malefic. So when you bring a malefic to a Doshanta house, that malefic has such strength to be able to deal with such heavy problems that they can actually cancel each other out, and the person can be victorious in these domains of life. So you actually want malefics in the 6th house, like Saturn and Mars, and to some degree, Sun will do well in the 6th house. Sun, I'm not too keen of Sun being in the 6th house because of the super practicality related to this house, but definitely Saturn and Mars here will do well.
What about a Rahu then?
Rahu will do really well here too. Rahu can overwhelm, let's say, its enemies. It can, because Rahu amplifies and externalizes everything. So Rahu can create a sense of overwhelm in the opposition that comes out of this house. So in that sense, it can distort things and then implement its own plans. So Rahu does well, but Saturn and Mars do really well here. Let's see.
Okay, and this would go for somebody has an empty house, but their ruler is Saturn or Mars, or you could look at it that way.
Yeah, so it would also be good. Let's say the ruler of the 6th house has gone to the 3rd house, another Upachaya house, or the ruler of the 6th house is doing a house exchange with the 8th house. That's actually a yoga. So there are certain kinds of rulership exchanges, or rulership has gone to a certain house that really actually complements this house. Like the ruler of the 6th has gone to the 3rd. This can make someone a very good athlete, just as a raw interpretation, because that was a house of our skill sets. That's a house of our competitors. This is the house of our enemies. So if they have that kind of synergy between them, it can be complementary. But if you see like the ruler of the 6th has gone into the 4th, again, we have to look at the whole charts in its holistic manner, but it could now indicate that 4th house matters are kind of being processed in the 6th and the 6th and the 4th. And that could bring some kind of unpleasant themes into the life. But in general, yeah, we have to look at where the ruler is.
But if it goes into another Dashanta house, that isn't that a yoga itself?
Yeah, like 6 and to the 8th. Yeah, especially if they're doing a sign exchange, the rulers
Okay.
are doing that. That's very good. Yeah, we just have to look at the whole chart. But like,
Yeah.
Saturn's practicality, Saturn's not going to be hot and bothered by the daily practical chores and routines and the redundancy of this house. That's what Saturn's about. Saturn wants to grind, and this is the house of grinding. So when a person has Saturn here, they're just not bothered by that. Saturn itself is very critical and it can dish out criticism. So this house, let's say you're in a work environment and there's a lot of that, Saturn itself can dish it out. Saturn itself has the endurance to put up with such a thing. That practicality of Saturn can come to put a cap on debt, for example, in this house. So Saturn becomes powerful here to defeat the problems that are in the 6th house. And for the 3rd time, I've used this analogy of Saturn goes into a war of attrition. In the 6th house with enemies and things of that sort, Saturn can do the same thing, because Saturn has that endurance, and Saturn limits things, chokes things out, restricts it, and makes others lose their resources. It generates scarcity for others. So in that way, in the 6th house, when he's dealing with such concepts as the enemy, it will choke them out over time. It's going to take time, but it's like, I don't care if it takes 10 years. I'm just going to keep doing this till you tap out. So yeah, so Saturn creates these kinds of environments, and Saturn's very detached and cold. And you don't want a planet like Moon in the 6th house, because it starts to take these things personal. Saturn's like, this is such as life. This is a phrase for Saturn in the 6th house. It is what it is. It makes it very impersonal to itself and it just treats it as a matter of fact. And life is grimy, life is gross. You got to do what you got to do. Roll up your sleeve, get in there and do it. This is sad. That's why Saturn will not succumb in the 6th house, whereas the benefics will. Yeah, these are the things we have to take into consideration when we talk about the 6th house and Saturn.
Okay. Well, yeah, if it's day-to-day routine chores, like this is Saturn's like forte, is it not?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's what Saturn's about. It's like work, grind. I don't care how grimy it is. The grimier and the dirtier it is, like I was saying in the key signification, Saturn represents abnormalities. Like Saturn can work in dirty spaces and it won't take it personal and is not hot and bothered by it. It's like, whatever. This is just what I got to do.
Does Saturn have the determination or Saturn lazy? Because Saturn's really slow.
Mhm.
So is it just you're going to get through it? It's just going to take longer?
Yeah, but sometimes that's exactly what you need. Let's say you have a lot of debt. Somehow debt has accumulated in your life. And literally when people have debts that's going to be taken, it's going to maybe take them 10 years to pay it. They get demolished by that because, and one of the reasons why they get demolished is by the worry that comes out of the 6th house. Saturn here, because of its enduring quality, allows a person to hold it in a very impersonal kind of way and be like, all I have to do is to cut this much from my groceries and to cut that much from there and just make these payments. I will do this for another 10 years until it's paid off. Benefics in general will have a hard time doing that anyway. They're incurring debt. You know, Saturn is just like, and Mars will want to do it as fast as possible. And sometimes that's not possible, but Saturn will just buckle down and be like, this is what needs to be done. It's
But you said
realistic,
it,
it's objective, and it's unlikely that Saturn will cause debt in the 6th house because Saturn is about being realistic. So Saturn's like, you know what? If I can't buy it in cash, I'm not putting it on credit card. I don't need it. Simplicity, I just don't want it. Screw it. That's Saturn's nature in the 6th house. So it's unlikely that just from a raw symbolic interpretation that Saturn is going to go take out a massive loan to go do a home renovation. Saturn's like, I'll just keep putting it in the bank. Once when I have it and can pay it in cash, then I'll do it. Till then, I'm not getting myself into debt. This is why Saturn's good here.
we should all learn from Saturn.
In the 6th, yeah.
But then what's the anxiety then?
What is Saturn's going to reduce the anxiety and the worry here because you have
Oh,
a practical nature about things. Like a lot of people, this is a house of work, your daily work. This is your 9 to 5 job where you wake up and you might be going to a job that you don't necessarily like. And this is what causes people anxiety and worry. I'm wasting my life away. I can't do this. This is not meant for me. Saturn's like, this is what you do to make a living. Just get up, go to work, get paid. Such is life. That person is not going to feel the kind of anxiety and worry that the other person feels. So
okay.
because of Saturn's practical and realistic nature, its coldness and its objective way of being, its realism, reduces the worries of this house. Because if you're like leisure seeking, comfort seeking, luxury seeking, this house is your nightmare. But Saturn is anti all those things. So when Saturn comes here, Saturn's not seeking those things. So its mind and its perception is not on those things. Therefore, is not worrying about those things. Because what we're mostly worried about as human beings are things that we want and don't have. Saturn doesn't want things. And in this house, what is there to be wanted? Debts, work, you know, it's like Saturn
Illness.
gonna do it. Yeah.
So then when it comes to illness or court cases or debts or any of these things, does Saturn kind of prevent those or?
So I like Mars better in the 6th house for overcoming the health issues in this house because Mars gets proactive because this house supports illness. Mars can here get into like a physical activity. Mars is like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to take care of my health. I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to eat healthy, all of these kinds of things. Saturn here can also do that, but through the method of negation, not action. So it's by renunciating, let's say, certain foods. it'll have that kind of a discipline to be like, the doctor's like, your cholesterol is very high. Saturn's here is like, I have no problem taking out all the saturated fats out of my diet. So in that sense, Saturn can help that health aspect of it here. But the primary thing, the way that Saturn helps us get through this house with the health issues, Saturn represents longevity. So Saturn can actually experience some illnesses here, but it will buy itself enough time till the cure comes around, till a good transit comes around, till a good dasha comes around, till we get around to it. It's not gonna let us get demolished. Saturn can endure it in this house.
Similar to debts, like if there's a huge amount of debt, Saturn can endure it because it's going to pay it off slow and steady.
Yeah, yeah. But as a raw symbolic interpretation, Saturn's not even going to put itself in that place. But let's say you got a divorce and because of your spouse, you're left with a lot of debt. And it's like, okay, here we are. All right, I guess I have to endure this. And Saturn's gonna think very objectively and rationally of how to consolidate this. Okay, it's gonna take me another 10 years to do it. Okay, and I'll do it. I'll grind till it's paid off. Yeah.
Okay, so Saturn will get you through it.
Yes. In the sixth house.
It's funny how in a lot of our videos we talk about divorce examples.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by the time we get to the 6th, 7th, and 8th, divorce become a theme, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Like divorce doesn't happen in the sixth house, but the proceedings of it, where your spouse is now your enemy and you're starting that conflict starts in the sixth house. It goes through the court proceeding in the seventh house. It's concluding in the seventh house, and then you get whatever you're supposed to get in terms of division of assets or what have you in the eighth house. That's why
So
every
could
time,
having,
sorry.
sorry, I was just going to say, so then could having Saturn here potentially make it an amicable divorce where you're not starting those proceedings?
No, it could start those proceedings, but it could be one of those very long, drawn out proceedings
Oh God.
so that you get the right division of assets, custody to children. And Saturn, I was saying it goes into a war of attrition. So if your partner has Saturn in the sixth house, you start a divorce proceeding with them, I would bet that is not going to be a easy, happy-go-lucky one. It's like, yeah, I'm done with you. I'm done with you. Okay, keep whatever. I'll keep whatever. No, Saturn here will grind.
Oh,
Saturn
like
will grind its
Saturn's,
enemies.
oh, so the person with the Saturn is going to come out stronger.
Yeah.
Oh God. So anyone out there going through a divorce,
Yeah.
look at your whole chart.
Yeah, you have to look at the whole chart. We're always talking about when we're doing just like a planet in a sign, planet in a house, planet conjunction. We're talking so basic. We're just talking about the primary symbolism and just blending those symbols, and that's it. But if you want an interpretation, then you have to understand it in the context of the chart. That's like taking any word, let's say in the English language or any language, it has a meaning in a certain context. The word is just a word, and then it changes within one context, and then it has another meaning in another context. Astrology is the same thing. So Saturn in a house is just one context. Saturn in a house with the ruler, now it's another. Saturn in a house with a ruler in a sect of the chart now is another. So yeah, we're talking very basic.
Yeah. So anyone who's going through a divorce, look at your whole chart.
Yeah, you have to look at the whole chart. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean that would be a big concern for a lot of people, right? Nobody wants a drawn out. I know I actually have a friend of mine, it took 6 years,
Yeah, some people's
which
divorces are insane. Like, and you
yeah,
know what? Like, if you have Saturn in the sixth house going through like a long drawn out divorce proceeding incurs a lot of debt on both
yeah,
sides,
yeah.
right? But this is sometimes Saturn will choose this kind of war of attrition because they know that if I drag this on for 6 years, I can pay it. Can you pay it? I'm going to draw this out for another 10 years and you're going to drop everything because you don't have a dime left to your name. No matter what you get from me, it's not going to do anything. The Saturn is cruel. So Saturn will get an extra element of cruelness in the sixth house. These are the ways that Saturn beats his enemies in the sixth house. It's not like Mars that goes directly to fight with them and to annihilate them. Saturn's like, I'm gonna choke you on breath by breath till you can't breathe. This is how Saturn defeats his enemies in the 6th.
Oh, so Saturn's like like you know how a lot of times they go through negotiation before you actually go to court with a
Yeah.
divorce because
Yeah.
they try to negotiate it. So basically, it'll come down to, look, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to go to drag this in court, but you're not going to have that money if you lose. Like, is it kind of like in the early, Saturn can basically just cut them off, basically being like, look, I can drag this on as long as possible.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So you can take what you get now,
Yeah.
or okay.
Yeah. Saturn can be so cruel here in a sense of like, again, talking raw interpretations. Like, I'm going to drain your resources to the point that you can't even take care of the kids. And I'll guarantee you, if you don't take what I'm offering you right now, at the end, you will not even have custody of the kids because they'll deem you as unfit to be a parent financially. So
Oh
yeah,
wow.
Saturn here can get very, very brutality. But that is how Saturn defeats the significations of this house and triumphs over it. So this is how it works. This is why Saturn's good in the 6th house.
Okay, so yeah, like they could put a stop, because I usually divorces they go through mediation before you actually go through a long drawn out
Yeah.
court thing. Okay, so Saturn can actually just, or lawyers could basically be like, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to end up going to court for the next 10 years or take what you get.
Like 6th house, one of the significations, obstacles. Saturn represents limitations and restrictions. And if you think about it, limitations and restrictions, the way we experience it as humans, is that we experience it as a kind of an obstacle. What Saturn does in the 6th house, it creates those obstacles for other people by creating limitations, boundaries, and restrictions for others.
And then Saturn's aspects are, let me
3rd,
see.
7th, and 10th.
Okay.
Yeah, so Saturn's third aspects falling into the 8th, 7th into the 12th, and 10th in the 3rd house.
And the third house is a good house to have an aspect on.
Yeah, and we saw Saturn does well in the 3rd house too, even though initially it should have been a lot of dissonance. We saw that Saturn actually doesn't do so bad in the 3rd house over time.
Oh,
And
so all of the aspects are actually good, because you said 8, 12, and third, right?
it falls on the 2 Doshanta houses and on an Upachaya house.
Oh, okay. So this is a good placement.
Yeah, but Saturn's aspects, Saturn's always going to be Saturn. You know, so if you have, let's say, some malefic sitting, I mean, benefic sitting in those houses, like, you know, to the 3rd house, Saturn's now putting a square on it, which means it's coming to like a conflict. It's a conflictual kind of a dynamic, right? So yeah, we have to take everything into consideration. It doesn't mean Saturn's aspects are good. Saturn's aspects are Saturn's aspects. It's exactly its key significations. And now in the 3rd house, its 10th aspect, it's squaring the 3rd house. So whatever that's happening in the 3rd house, Saturn's like restrictions, limitations, you know? If you have like, let's say Mars there, even though Mars and Saturn are kind of like, ugh, they ramp up the charts to make it very undefeatable over time. But if you have like a benefic there, Saturn's really restricting them.
But then in the 8th house, when it comes to this divorce, is it restricting that divorce from finalizing?
Is the 3rd aspect restricting it?
Yeah, because if Saturn has that gaze on the 8th house.
Look, from my experience, the 3rd house of aspect, the 3rd aspect of Saturn is always helping.
Okay.
It's always like it's setting restriction and boundaries in a way that is helpful. Its 10th aspect is really buckling things down. It's really making it difficult. It's like do or die. So it seems to me that the 3rd aspect of Saturn is more of a gift, whereas the 10th aspect is really making a demand. Like, I want it this way, especially if Saturn is in a lesser degree than the planet to that 10th aspect or that square. Saturn has a lot of power. But if its degrees are higher than the planet in that house, you're feeling it, but it's not a chokehold.
Okay, so then in this case, like the 8th house, like things will settle, obviously. Like it might take a while, but it'll work out.
Yeah, it's pushing it that way. Yeah, for you to get something out of it in the 8th house, which is, as once when we get to the 8th house, maybe we should talk about it when we're in the 8th house. But what you get out of the eighth house is, how do I gain from others? How do I get from others? Right?
Yeah.
So whatever you're doing in the sixth house, Saturn's trying to get something out of it for itself or for the native in the eighth house.
Okay. So initiating that divorce is the 6th house, basically.
Yeah, starting the proceedings, creating that initial obstacle, that initial division, that initial enemy. All of these things are going to be set off in the sixth house.
But does it mean that it's actually going to be a bad divorce? Like a lot of divorces, some people are just like, you know what, it didn't work out. Let's just go our own separate ways.
From a raw symbolic interpretation, then you don't have Saturn there. You have
Oh,
you have
okay.
a benefic there, right?
Okay.
Like
Okay.
if Venus will be like, let's just cooperate. Let's just cooperate. And let's say their synastry chart, the other person is also having that mild and cooperative nature, and they're like, yeah, you know what, we didn't work out, let's just wrap this up nicely and peacefully as much as is possible. But when you put Saturn here as a raw interpretation, no, Saturn, it's not going to do that. You
Okay.
just don't F with Saturn in the sixth house or Mars. They're both,
Okay.
they both have a brutal side. They really show their malefic, but to the benefit of the native and against the detriment of whoever that's coming against them.
Well, that's why I'm just saying if you know your spouse's chart
Yeah.
and you know that they have a Saturn there,
They will create
then
obstacles for you in that kind of
yeah.
reading.
So maybe you may just step back and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to get far in this.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where it comes to the
Yeah.
negotiating table. Like a lot of times there's a negotiation before you actually go to a court anyway.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, this is also worth mentioning too, because we'll keep focusing on divorce because naturally, because this is a house of this is a very conflictual house. But at the same time, in a good marriage, in a solid relationship, you also want a Saturn there too. Because Saturn, this is a house that supports others, right? This house is trining even the fourth house, which is the house of, it's sextiling the fourth house, which is about family. So here, the Saturn individual will work hard to support their people. So
Like the family.
it could be the family, right?
Yeah.
The next house is a house of partnership. The natural movement of the sixth house to the seventh house is towards the partner in the right context too, and not just in these messy situations. Saturn's working very hard here to support others. It has longevity, it has endurance to stay. This can translate to like a stubbornness that even if I die, I'm going to support you. So Saturn can get these kinds of meanings. I will overcome anything. Saturn represents death. I will work myself to the bones so that you guys are provided for. So you get these kinds of meanings out of Saturn in the sixth house also. But yeah, if you get the enemy part of this house, then Saturn comes out very harsh too. Saturn's very unforgiving. It's gonna grind you down. That's what it wants to do.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Like we saw Saturn in the 12th house when we're doing the sector of the chart about the self.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying Saturn's at its joy because again, even in it's a Doshanta house too. Saturn does well there because Saturn doesn't feel so bothered by being isolated and alone and not being a minimalist, not having a lot, not being so active. And in the sixth house is not so bothered by all the conflicts and all the griminess and all the routine and all the practicality that's in the sixth house. Saturn's very strong on both sides of this axis because Saturn's just not bothered by the things that are happening in these two houses. And they're both Doshanta houses.
So I guess you kind of explained how the 7th house is going to be eroded, I guess.
This is supporting the seventh house.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if we think about the natural progression and movements, just like the way the planets move counterclockwise, they're moving from the fifth house to the sixth house to the seventh house. So the sixth house is the natural movement is sixth house to the seventh house here.
Yeah.
So the sixth house is supporting the significations because now come to the end point of the seventh house. The seventh house is the others. It's anyone but us. So everyone else, right? So
Okay.
and the sixth house was supporting others. So it's almost like going through that training in life where you're just starting to get the socialization of how to be for others. I mean, think about it. Even if we take house perfections, so age 0 to 1 is in the first house. 1 to 2 is in the second house. By the time we come to the sixth house is your sixth birthday, right?
Hmm.
What happens in your seventh birthday? You go to school. It's the first time in your life where you're dealing with others. Sixth house, you're in preschool. So you're learning, how do I support others? How do I cooperate with others? Because by the time you get to the seventh house, you better know how to do this. So the sixth house is like the tricycle, where the seventh house is the bicycle. You got to know how to ride it. So the sixth house
But
kind of takes your sense of self, like everything's about me and me and me, away
yeah.
from you. And it's just starting to teach you, no, no, no. There's this other part of life where nothing's about you. You got to know how to be about other people.
Yeah, the reason I was asking about the erosion and the supporting is because with the other sections, but yeah, like you said, you could
Yeah.
explain it another time.
Yeah.
Like the other ones, like was like the foundation for it. Whereas, the one,
The best visualization of this is the fourth house
yeah,
and like third, fourth, and fifth, just the way you visualize it, right? The fifth house is right under, is like a pillar holding it. Fourth
yeah.
house is sitting on top of it, so it feels like support. And it feels like the third house is just like encroaching, right?
Oh, I guess using the North Indian chart.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just stick in a diagram then of
Yeah.
that chart.
Okay, so now we're gonna move to our anchor point. I just realized in the other videos, we always talked about the anchor points first and then
First,
yeah, but it's okay. We'll
but
make
can you not just edit them that way?
No, we'll make do of it. It's okay. So the sixth house was supporting the seventh house, and we'll come to see how, because the seventh house is our anchor point. The seventh house is the house that represents that sector of the chart best, which has to do with other people. And it's opposing the first house, which is ourselves. So the seventh house comes to be about partnership in terms of cooperation, and it comes to be about marriage. And then another signification is trades, commerce, things of that nature. And then this house also has to do with the setting of the sun, because this is where the sun sets, which comes to represent ending of journeys, endings in general, conclusions, and death. So when we bring Saturn here, Saturn has resonance and dissonance, and we should not confuse this with Saturn in Libra, that it's exalted, but Saturn has similar effects in the seventh house. So for example, let's take marriage, partnership, and contracts. All three of these require longevity and endurance. They all require some kind of a practicality to be able to last. So when Saturn comes here, Saturn becomes like a binding agent that can make these kinds of dynamics last for a long time. Now, if your objective is to be in a contract that is going to have great longevity and is going to last for another 50 years, great, you want Saturn here. But if you are in a toxic relational dynamic, marriage, partnership, contract, Saturn is like, again, got you in a chokehold. It's like, nope, you can't leave. I hold things together. It's like cementing it, right? So Saturn can have a lot of great qualities in the seventh house in a sense of holding these relational dynamics together. But Saturn doesn't bring the kind of warmth you want in the relational dynamics in the seventh house, because Saturn has to do about coldness, distance, objectivity, being rational. And in a relational dynamic, you want a sense of warm cooperation. You don't want to cooperate because you're contractually like binded to this person or this situation to do it. You also want your heart to do it. But Saturn will point to the fine print and say the only reason why we're in this contract is because you're supposed to do this. And the other person's like, but I thought I'm in this because I love you. And we just signed the contract. So Saturn can create these kinds of feelings in the seventh house too. But when
Oh,
it
so
comes
if the spouse is just going to feel like she's going to be, or he's going to be reminded that it's just a contract.
it could, right? I mean, you could get situations here where like a prenup could happen with this, and the person will always remind the person, like, if you don't fulfill your duty that's in this contract, then these are the cons. Saturn generates fear. So in these kinds of situations, Saturn could generate that fear for the partner. Like you're contractually obligated to do this. You sign the paper. You know, it's not coming from that cooperative aspect of it, of the heart aspect of it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So in a business contract, that might be okay, but in a marriage,
Yeah, it's
that could be probably devastating.
yeah. But if you don't have that dynamic, I'm not saying Saturn will always do this in a dynamic, but I'm just saying if there are those kinds of human beings and Saturn sitting there, then it creates these kinds of feelings and the person feels trapped because they can't get out. But let's say two people are actually, they do have that sense of warmth and cooperation with each other. The contract is a helpful thing because it's just denoting longevity and endurance of their marriage, for example. It's binding them together. They have the love and there's this extra force, aka Saturn or Shani, holding them now together till death do them apart. And that's a great thing. But I'm just saying, in other situations, when you get Saturn in the 7th house, it can create fear in the partner. It can create these weird obligations. And it will always, because Saturn's cruel, it will always remind the partner that, hey, don't forget, there's no way you can get out of this because you agreed to this. And it's part of our contract. And that doesn't feel pleasant in a relationship dynamic. And another thing we have to remember about the 7th house, this is one part of this chart that more often than not represents our significant other rather than ourselves. It can represent ourselves too, in terms of how we behave, how we show up in a relationship, in a marriage partner, and signing contracts.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the house of others. So it is saying how others also show up in our chart. So that's something to take into consideration too. Now, going to that part, should I move to that other signification of this house about exchange, commerce, and trades?
Yeah, but just, you know how you said it represents the other person? So that means that fear is in the other person.
So let's say I have Saturn in my 7th house.
Mm-hmm.
It could very well be saying something about my partner, how they are. It could also say something about my nature and how I operate and the conditions that I bring in. But a lot of time is denoting what my partner and his behavior, my preference is a male, so his behavior towards me being indicated by the 7th house Saturn.
Okay, so he would feel that he's stuck.
No, I would feel that I'm stuck because of the conditions he's bringing,
Oh, okay. Okay.
because
So
it's
it's
showing how he is.
oh, okay. He's bringing the difficult constraint or the difficultness.
The
Yeah.
other is now coming into your chart, but that does not, I repeat this, that does not mean it always takes two to dance. So it is saying something about my innate disposition, characteristics, ways of acting and being in the world that's actually attracting such a person too. That 7th house is also saying something about that. I don't know how, which way this thumb should be going, but
Mm.
yeah, but it's not just about the self, the native. It's also saying something about how others show up in the chart, tucking in the thumb. Yeah. So now going to that other part of the chart about not the charts, the next set of significations in this house, trade, commerce, and exchange. This is kind of good because Saturn brings that objectivity and rational way of being. Like Saturn here is not really going to get duped on trade and commerce. It's not taking things personal. It's like, what's our profit margin? What's your long-term projection of this? Show me something, like what's going to come of this. So yes, and Saturn here, in terms of setting up businesses that have longevity, it can do well. It'll also know how to put restrictions on others. So yeah, I think in this part of it, it comes to act a little bit more benign and objective and rational, which is a good thing. But when it comes to those contract, marriage, things of that nature, it can't take the slant of being harsh. But on a good note of it, or the good way that it manifests, is that if two people want to be together, Saturn's going to make sure that it has longevity. And as I was saying earlier, this house has to do with endings and death. So the longevity of the partnership, the longevity of the marriage, the entity, corporations can come in the 7th house too. So they can be long lasting. that death part of this house gets dragged on. So life is long. The ending is not near because Saturn represents time and the endurance of it. So in these ways, it comes to have a good slant if that's what you want. But if you're stuck like I don't know, in a business partnership or in a marriage and you really want out, Saturn in the 7th house, oh my God, it's going to take a long time.
To get out.
Yeah, it's just like you are just binded together.
I mean, the marriage example is, I guess it's like you said, that's the main thing of those houses, but I think a lot of people can probably relate to those, or relationship kind of example.
Yeah, the relationship example, I mean, most of us in this life are bound to experience it at some point. So it's something that resonates with everyone, but a lot of people are in business partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And like Saturn does so much better in business partnership because Saturn's about other people. Saturn's not necessarily like Mercury, the way that it's diplomatic and it can cooperate, but Saturn is about other people. Whereas Mars, when you put it in the 7th house, Mars can, on a raw interpretation, Mars cannot cooperate with other people to establish business partnership. Mars is better off as a solo entrepreneur, but Saturn is about other people. So Saturn here knows how to create or to be that binding agent that holds a multitude of other people under the same banner, such as a corporation or some sort of a business with multiple partners, or the marriage, which is the relation between two people. Yeah, so Saturn's able to do this other people work and keep them together. And the way that
And
Saturn does this is just like restricts all the roads out. So once when you're in, you're in.
so if you have Saturn here, most likely you're probably not going to get divorced.
No, or it will be very hard to do it. You could get for example, let's just go to this little bit of the psychological aspect of Saturn in these relationship dynamic situations we find in the 7th house. Saturn's criticizing, Saturn's rejecting, Saturn alienates, Saturn is cold, Saturn can rationalize other people's feelings. Saturn will rationalize as to why you should do what you should do in this marriage just because it's your duty, for example. So it's a kind of like a dehumanizes here, right? So from a psychological perspective, if we wanted to interpret how Saturn manifests in the 7th house, Saturn could bring these kinds of slants. It doesn't bring warm, fuzzy feeling to a house that is supposed to be about cooperation. Because in essence, relationships, the 7th house is outside of Saturn. We completely take Saturn out of the 7th house. The 7th house has to do with cooperation, negotiation, mutual respect, equality, reciprocal relationships. This is the 7th house at its best. It does have a sense of warmth in it, in a sense that I'm listening to you and I care, and you're listening to me and you care. So what is our middle grounds? What's the best way of doing this? Saturn is a malefic. Saturn's going to bring a harshness about this, which takes all the warm and fuzzy feelings out of this and just creates obligations and necessities and practicalities, contractual obligations. That's what it does. Nonetheless, if you really want to be in a relational dynamic that's going to last and have longevity, Saturn, that's where you want it. It will not end till someone dies. That's what it does. But if you don't want that, then God forbid, you're stuck for a long time. So that's how Saturn goes.
Okay, but from business contracts, it could be possibly a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, unless if like you're also stuck in a business partnership, like I want to leave, and then Saturn's like, well, the fine print says that you're stuck unless you pay A, B, C, and D, you know?
Yeah.
Saturn's demanding that you cooperate because it's stipulated. Yeah, and Saturn has a very strong slant of distrust. Saturn, Jupiter trusts. Jupiter's about trust, faith, and belief. Saturn is a strong distrust, and we can trace this back to its own origin story with his own father, the sun, Surya. He does not trust, he does not specially trust authority. So the moment that in the 7th house, in that relational dynamic, someone wants to exert any kind of an authority, Saturn has distrust and Saturn tries to put them right back in their place. And then in trade and commerce too, Saturn could be a little too practical. So people who are trying to make big money out of something, Saturn's kind of stingy too. So it's not like a risk-taking planet. Mars would be risk-taking, but Saturn's not. So slow, cautious, all these kinds of things come into play too. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what? Saturn might be hard to sign that contract too initially because of his distrust. So it might
So it's
have,
going to do due diligence and go over everything. And
yeah, I want a prenup. I want everything stipulated. I need to know you know your place. I need to know I know my place. So it's not like Saturn's rational. He's going to think about things. Yeah, it might be a long time before you get this person to sign that marriage certificate. And then maybe later you wish they never did. And if there's a really good dynamic, you'll be like, thank God it eventually happened. Yeah. But Saturn
okay.
in Libra is a different story. Yeah, because Saturn in Libra starts to bring, and we shouldn't conflate the signs with the houses. Saturn is of air quality, is Vata, and then sign of Libra is air quality, sign of Libra. This is in Libra, Saturn being about other people starts to bring that face of itself that is looking for equality. Whereas just in the 7th house, Saturn doesn't bring that dimension to it. But let's say you have Saturn in Libra in the 7th house, we're talking about something very different. It's a hell of a lot more pleasant than just Saturn in the 7th house by itself or in some other sign. So, and the death signification, disappearance and endings and things of that, Saturn will just drag it on. And it's like you get married, and if the end is only via death, both people will be old, be a long marriage.
Oh, because Saturn.
Yeah.
So I guess when you're even in business, they can kind of assess like whether they should go into a business partnership or
It can assess like Saturn in that sign. I mean, that
yeah,
house.
yeah.
Yeah, Saturn's very rational. Saturn's not gonna jump in because they love you. Saturn's actually looking at the practicality of like, what's in it for me? What's in it for you? Why should we? I mean, like when people fall in love, they rarely ask like, why should we establish this relationship? What's the benefit? What's the cost benefit? But Saturn will do that. Saturn's rational, cold, objective is about analysis. So Saturn might do a pro and cons list and then decide
Okay.
based on that. Yeah.
But I'm guessing is fair.
No, Saturn's not fair.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay.
No, Venus is fair.
Okay.
Jupiter is fair. Guru, both gurus, Shukracharya and Brahaspati, they represent fairness. Saturn will revolt against whoever that's in a position of power, and that's not necessarily a fair thing to do. There are some people that will go for the underdog. No, like it's like the underdog just murdered someone. Like what the hell? You know, why are sometimes you can't go for the underdog. So Saturn's not about fairness. In the sign of Libra, yes. Saturn by itself, no. Saturn in the 7th house, no. Not one signification of Saturn, of his key symbols, can come close to indicating fairness. Like
Okay.
limitation, disease, failure, bad luck. These are the things in life that we consider unfair as human beings. The benefics are more about fairness, especially Venus and Jupiter. Mercury too, because Mercury has to do about balance, that diplomacy that he brings in. He tries to balance things out between all parties. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not about justice and things like that.
When it comes to the sign of Libra, that's why I'm saying we can't conflate them. It's Libra that does that and brings that side out of Saturn, but Saturn by itself doesn't have these qualities because Saturn is about other people and Libra is about establishing equilibrium, always weighing things there to see what is fair, what is just, what is equitable, what is equality. So it's rationality and its objectivity starting to lean that way, which comes to be more beneficial to both parties, but not in the 7th house and not in itself as itself. Because
Okay.
different signs operationalize the planets. They force them to do certain kind of acts. And then if they have some sort of a resonance because of their own key symbols, then they work out. When they don't, then they just become weird.
And the 6th is supporting Saturn.
6 is very much, yeah. The 6th house is like an environment that has a lot of the Saturn qualities. So Saturn feels at home here. But like relationship requires being personal, and Saturn's impersonal. So just by the virtue of that is creating some dissonance and conflict.
Should we now move on to the 8th and see how
Yeah.
it's being not supported?
It's a Dashanta house though, right?
Yeah.
So Saturn, this is a house that erodes the 7th house, but Saturn comes here and in some ways Saturn's not going to do good, and then in some ways Saturn's going to do good, as we'll see. What time is it?
8:20. Well, or do you want to just add it to the next day? Because if it has a lot of significations.
This one has more significations than the 6th house.
Okay. So yeah, we can do it
Good.
tomorrow.
Thank you for today. That's it for now. Much love. Till next time.